The initial report aired by Al Jazeera included footage of Lieutenant Colonel Gary Hensley, the chief of the U.S. military chaplains in Afghanistan, calling on soldiers to hunt people for Jesus.
The special forces guys, they hunt men, basically. We do the same thing as Christians. We hunt people for Jesus. We hunt them down. Get the hound of heaven after them. So we get them in the kingdom. Right? That's what we do. That's our business.
I'm joined now by two guests who've closely followed the story. Jeff Charlotte is the contributing editor for Harper's Magazine. He joins us from Rochester, New York. He's author of The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism at the Heart of American Empire, which is coming out in paperbacks next month. His latest article is the cover story of the May issue of Harper's Magazine. It's called Jesus Killed Muhammad, The Crusade for a Christian Military. And we're joined from Albuquerque at KNME PBS by Mikey Weinstein, an Air Force veteran and founder of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. A registered Republican, he served as legal counsel to the Reagan administration for 3 years and is author of With God on Our Side, One Man's War Against an Evangelical Coup in America's Military. We did call Colonel Greg Julian in Afghanistan and invite him on the program. He said we have a war to fight here and was unable to join us. Jeff Charlotte, first you. Talk about your reaction to these videotapes and the response by the military that it's taken out of context.
I think that's anything but the truth. You know, what we see on that videotape is really just the tip of the iceberg. When Mikey Weinstein and the Military Religious Freedom Foundation came to me and said, you know, you should be writing about this subject, I was a little skeptical that it could be as widespread as they said, but in more than 100 interviews at every rank, I encountered that same kind of thinking, and the same kind of thing that you see there on display with Lieutenant Colonel Hensley is replicated over and over and over from private to general, but most frighteningly, it's concentrated in the officer corps.
You write extensively about Hensley. Tell us who he is and the significance of this videotape.
Well, Lieutenant Colonel Hensley, that you see on that videotape, you know, talking about hunting people for Jesus, was at the time the top chaplain, top military chaplain in Afghanistan. And I don't know if you can quite make it out on that videotape. If you look closer at the T-shirt he's wearing, it shows his affiliation with a sort of a fundamentalist group called Chapel Next, and you can see a sort of a Christian cross inscribed over a map of Afghanistan. If you follow the rest of that footage is just as equally disturbing. At one point, speaking of the sort of the apocalyptic times that he believes we're in, he says that you know, the U.S. soldiers there have a mission, basically to work, you know, carry out the work of God, and then he declares that we, meaning the U.S. military, we are the new Israel. He repeats this for emphasis: we are the new Israel. You know, I would have thought that was. This guy was just a kind of a rogue, a maverick, if I didn't speak to so many other officers with just the same attitude. In the story, I talk about Lieutenant Colonel Bob Young, who is also in Afghanistan at Kandahar Air Base, and he was quite plain and boasting about a PowerPoint presentation he had given to Afghan warlords, explaining that American government was based on Christianity, that our Christian God was what made it great, and Afghanistan had a choice if it wanted to achieve democracy. And of course, that choice was going to be for Jesus. These people don't even know that they're crossing the line between church and state.
The title of your piece in Harper's is called Jesus Killed Muhammad. Tell us where this comes from.
Well, after about a year of interviewing military personnel, this was in some ways the most frightening story that I encountered. A man named Staff Sergeant Jeffrey Humphrey, one of the very few soldiers who in this military climate had the courage to come forward and speak out about what he had seen. He'd been stationed in Samara. It was Easter. The day began calmly. Chaplain brought around a copy of Mel Gibson's anti-Semitic film Passion of the Christ, which they then put on constant play throughout the day. When they came under attack, the Special Forces, Army Special Forces to whom he was assigned, had their Iraqi translator, an Iraqi-American Christian, paint in giant red Arabic letters on the side of a Bradley fighting vehicle the words, "Jesus killed Muhammad." Then, while they put the translator on the roof with a bullhorn shouting in Arabic, "Jesus killed Muhammad," and then training their guns, training American guns, and anybody who responded, the Bradley fighting vehicle rolled out into the city of Samarra and drawing fire everywhere it went, leading the special forces to conclude that every single Iraqi who took offense at these words, "Jesus killed Muhammad," was part of the enemy and therefore needed to be destroyed. And I spoke to the man who drove that Bradley, Lieutenant John DiGiulio, now Captain John DiGiulio, promoted since, and he describes wreaking almost biblical destruction on one whole block, blowing up every single thing he saw. And he said he was able to do this because God was on his side and because he'd been spiritually armored by watching Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, and that he thanked his chaplain for preparing him for that kind of spiritual battle in the streets of Iraq.
Very particulate of the technologically most lethal organization ever created by humankind, which is our U.S. military. It's everywhere. We're about 2 inches away, from a fundamentalist, Christian America through our U.S. military. I've come from a conservative military Republican family with 3 generations of military academy graduates. 3 of my kids have graduated from the Air Force Academy. The only journalist that has grasped this, moved into the mainstream media has been Jeff Sharlet, and he was incredibly, skeptical when we first started talking a couple of years ago. And I beg everybody out there to at least just do 2 things. Read Jeff's book. It's more than 10 pages, so you actually have to read it. The Family, The Secret Fundamentalism, at the Heart of American Power or Empire, whatever you want to say. And then the Harper's cover story by Jeff. It's very incontrovertible. What you saw in that, what Al Jazeera released, is nothing new. We've been talking about it forever, but there are hundreds of thousands of translated into Arabic, Pashto, Dari, biblical tracts, Bibles, coins. There are so many parachurch organizations, the Worldwide Military Baptist Missions, the Soldiers Bibles Ministry, the Campus Crusades Military Ministries. You can't count them all. This is how bad it is. And, docile and supine America needs to wake up, because what we're doing, we look exactly like the Crusaders of 1096 to the Iraqis and now the Afghans. And that's all there is to it, Amy.
Mikey Weinstein, tell us what the Christian Embassy video is.
This was first written about by Jeff in, I think it was 2006, wasn't it, Jeff? In an article in Harper's that came out. And we took a look at this, and I was astonished. I remember it was Thanksgiving Day, and I was trying to find a way to stay out of the kitchen so I wouldn't have to help with the meal. I was reading Jeff's story, and this thing blew up in my mind. Couldn't believe what I saw. This was a group of senior Pentagon officials, some of them like Pete Guerin, who's currently the Secretary of the Army, a number of generals and other folks that were in uniform being filmed in the Pentagon, and they were pushing the mission of this extreme right-wing fundamentalist Christian organization called the Christian Embassy. We held a press conference at the National Press Club on December 11th, I think it was 2006, demanded that the brand new secretary, Gates, had taken over for Rumsfeld, that he conduct an investigation, and the DOD-IG came back, and earlier in Democracy Now! Today we saw what one of the DOD-IG reports talked about with regard to those 75 senior military officials that were trying to sell the validity of invading Iraq, and that report came back and faulted 7 of the senior officials for clearly crossing the line, not constitutionally, but essentially for wearing their Halloween costumes, their uniforms at the wrong time. And most of them have since been promoted. And what generally happens when we catch the military desecrating the Constitution, which is pretty much every couple of hours, is that they stretch the crime scene tape. They say move on, move one. Their code 1 is it didn't happen. Code 2 is it's an isolated incident. Code 3, it was taken out of context. And to Colonel Julian, who was too much of a coward to come on Democracy Now! Today, when he says we have a war to fight, well, unfortunately, the war seems to be between fundamentalist Christians and the Constitution. What I would say to him is what Martin Luther King said, which is, in the end, Colonel Julian and Pentagon, we remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And there comes a time when silence becomes betrayal. And our United States military, in the main, is betraying the oath it took to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, not a particular weaponized gospel perspective of Jesus Christ, of which Jeff speaks about and has written about for many years.
Jeff
Reagan wiped that out so that the chaplain corps became predominantly fundamentalist. Some chaplains estimate today it's about 80% fundamentalist. And then things really picked up after 9/11 when this group, Officers Christian Fellowship, started seeing America's conflicts as what they described as spiritual war. And what's really frightening is they describe it as a spiritual conflict between good and evil. They describe Mikey Weinstein as satanic. This show would be satanic from their perspective. And that's the problem. They see, not only do they see those whom they're fighting overseas as part of the opposition, but they see even those within the military who are not a part of their movement as, at best, unwitting tools of Satan. I mean, this sounds like loony stuff, but then you look at the size of the organization.